I know one thing, that I know nothing. Socrates. I like this phrase. When I first heard it, stuck with me. There is an expectation when asked to give a lecture that one will impart some wisdom. So the wisdom is this: I know one thing, that I know nothing.
I think Abi's a very odd case, actually. I think she's got probably the most unusual CV of all the writers in the series. Unbelievably successful as a playwright in her own right.
I think with playwrights who have schooled themselves in the theatre, there's obviously a huge versatility with dialogue. They tend to be very good with characters.
And then a very successful kind of career in TV with very much able to kind of juggle the needs of a longer series or of a one-off.
When I'm pitching or having an idea pitched to me, I try to keep blank. It's because I'm waiting for why I should write this idea, why I should spend the next 2, 3, often more years writing and rewriting and shaping and cutting and trying to find one's way through a mental maze of possibilities. And the truth is, I often start a script still not knowing. For me, this is often the best way to be. It's the carrot, this state, the desire to find something when one is often grappling around in the dark. And it can come in many different ways and at many different times. Sometimes you get a hint of it in the research, a sense of what it might be.
Why is it that certain ideas make me go, I'm interested in that? There's something about that. And it's a sort of instinctive starting point for me. Is there's just something in it that I go, I don't know why, but I'm drawn to it. And in the same way, I have to listen to that critical voice, because sometimes you can go, yeah, no, I love that, it sounds great, and your instinct's not really there about it. And those are always the projects that never work for me. So it's very difficult to define it as one thing, and it can sometimes be because I may have fully interrogated one element of something, and the irony is when you do a film, for example, about sex addiction, suddenly you get sent lots of ideas about sex addiction. I mean, no one sort of, or, you do something about the First World War and everyone says, will you do another film about the First World War? And actually it's often the last thing you want to do.
This chink of light that I try to find, that I mentally stick on my laptop. It's my running partner, my torch in the dark. Often it will be at the core of what my screenplay will be about. It is the start of gaining knowledge, of knowing something, however brief, and affirms to me that out of nothing, there is always something. Outside of the facts, outside of what is visible, I call it the dog whistle that I have trained my ear to hear.
She's just an incredibly original writer. I think she gets very, very taken up with different situations and can take something that's a kind of true life tragedy, something that's a very, very contemporary, very risque story, and something that's a real period piece, kind of delving into the depths of the BBC and, kind of how early television worked. I think I find it very, very hard to sort of find the through line in all her work.
My ideas can often be based on strange nuances that go on, so it can be being in a cafe and noticing a mother with a daughter and hearing their fight and suddenly realising, the mother's incredibly jealous of the daughter because she's growing more beautiful than she is. And wow, that's interesting. Well, how do I feel about beauty and age? And how terrifying would it be to be a woman who was beautiful and relied on her looks her whole life, and then suddenly she starts to, what about decay? God, we're all decaying. Wow, the city's, and I will build from that. So that will be my starting point. And in a way, that was sort of how Shame came about, that riffing on a thought and a theme with Steve. Or I'll be sent a book that will just kick me in the guts, or a newspaper cutting that will make me go, well, this has to be written about. So it has to be a compulsion. There's something in it that there is a compulsion. And probably on a really selfish and narcissistic level, it's because somewhere in it relates back to me.
I start at the beginning. I always write linear. I can never write an ending if I haven't found out where it starts. Openings are important to me. The first play I wrote took me 2 years, and I think it was because I wrote and rewrote the first page maybe 100 times. I now think of that play as my apprenticeship. Then I did use a typewriter, and I would yank the paper out theatrically, toss it in a ball and throw it in the bin and start again. Isn't that the way writers do it in the films? I now see it was the mental warm-up, the place I was starting to piece together all the other moments, and that the reworking and working is just my way of finding my way in. It's where I try to bring form to the chaos. Most of my writing, the writing journey, is a process of this, finding form to chaos. Because as much as I try to stay in this state of nothing, pretty quickly my mind is racing, while all the people I have met, books I've read, films I've watched, interviews I have seen. The opening is when I'm finally alone, when it's just me, well, the laptop and me.
The newsreels are dead. We've bored the public for too long. Give me this opportunity and I'll prove it. Thank you. Of course, I'll need an assistant.
2 minutes, Mr. Lyon.
But may I say one more thing? You haven't seen my best yet.
The ability to change, to shapeshift, is key in writing drama. That doesn't mean one has to concede on every point. The joy for me as a writer is that despite the fact I spend most of my life on my own, in a room, eating too much chocolate and drinking too much tea, eventually they let me out into the world. And then I get to work with directors and actors, brilliant actors, and genius DOPs and designers and producers who listen and make your work sing.
And one young woman in particular has caught the eye of a certain leading man, actor Adam LeRay. Engagement looks set for the Honourable Ruth Elms, daughter of Lord Elms of Framlingham, to this eligible young bachelor.
I like the relinquishing of control. I like the handing over of control, but because I choose very carefully who I work with, you know, and so as if I don't think it's going to work, I withdraw in some way. So, and I think it is an act of faith. So that's what, you know, that's part of the process. But it is hard, I think, when you love a script and you know the material and you know your story very well. It's hard sometimes if you feel that that's being changed, and it will inherently get changed. And so I totally respect writers who are like that, because they perhaps just have a stronger sense of their vision, whereas mine always feels quite fluid. But at its heart, the kind of navigational compass is always, it's the dog whistle that I talk about. It's the sense that there is something in there that excited me, and I believe is the thing that triggers a director to be drawn to it and an actor to be drawn to it.
I have been lucky, I've been very, very lucky. It's amongst this ensemble where the work is really made. I never know if I'm the builder or the architect. The role shifts all the time, but what I have come to conclude is that the script is the muse. For producer, director, actor, DOP and designer, it is the point of inspiration that everyone must think of as their own.
I mean, as a producer, I know how fundamentally important it is to get a good story and a great idea, and that story and that idea have to have great believable characters who have living, palpable, breathing emotions that people will relate to and believe in, and, you know, scripted action sequences or dramas that you can shoot and are worth shooting. And actually that all comes from the head of a screenwriter. They have to start it, they have to deliver on it. It's only on the basis of that screenplay that you're going to attract a good cast and a good director. So we really owe a huge amount to them, and they're working with screenwriters is part of the process that I personally enjoy most.
Handing over the script, delivering it, it's a bit like giving birth to a baby. Sometimes an ugly, bothersome baby that you have loved and carried and cared for and fed for 9 months, but now it is born. And like having children, the shock is to discover that you give the most vulnerable part of yourselves legs and you put it out there. And very quickly you watch it adopted, you watch it become someone else's, hopefully and eventually an audience who will take it in as one of their own. And you just have to trust that you have done enough, that it carries enough of your genes, that it won't grow up and become something completely separate from its point of conception, completely alien from its point.
I think you have to be careful sometimes, because you can lose your voice, or you can allow your voice to be so misguided, or so, the work does move beyond you, and that's essential. But I think also what you're trying to do is you're trying to contain the kind of organising principle of what you were trying to say, and the kind of pot of themes and the strength of the narrative, and you hope that that will carry through and that will become the inspirational point for director, production designer, actor.
When I first approached about writing a film about Margaret Thatcher, there was a very good script in place. But at the time, the small screen had suddenly been inundated with some very brilliant films covering her early years, the Falkland Crisis and beyond. Then I read an article written by Carol Thatcher about her mother describing what it was like to be with someone who now lives in an other world. Suddenly, the life of Margaret Thatcher became the life of a very particular everywoman, a powerful, revered and often reviled former head of state. It would not only be a study of power, but of loss of power. The ability of the mind to play tricks and rewind one's life would provide a structure, a form for the chaos of a rich and powerful life.
You know, I think I grew to really have a great connection for the character of Margaret Thatcher. You know, I personally, her politics, I think most people in the arts probably, you know, didn't adhere to her politics. And I didn't. I grew up in the 80s, so obviously that was part, you know, a huge part of my upbringing.
I approach it as I would approach any other subject. I'm a writer of fiction. That is my job, to find something beyond the real, truth in artifice.
Responsibility is an interesting one. You know, I've never written about someone who's still alive, and it is an interesting experience. And so it was very important to me to see that film as something other, and to see it as a sort of, as I say, a study of power and loss of power, and really connecting with the public profile of someone, but also not being able to ignore the elephant in the room that was being spoken about in the press and that we all know about.
Even if I know nothing, the film must know something. And this is the third thing I have come to understand. I have to find the chink of light. I have to find my opening, my way in. And somewhere I have to find what I feel the film is about. Even if it is never used, even if it is never screened, I have to write it, place it somewhere in the thoughts and words of the character, enclose it in a scene, embed it in the heart of a film. The one thing I know nothing, until I know something. This is that something.
Too much too much butter.
I like butter.
Yes. Milk's gone up. 49p a pint.
Good grief. You'll have to economise. Suppose we could always sell the car. Or take in paying guests. Watch out. She's on the prowl.
Eat your egg.
Goodness, there you are.
Yes, here we are.
I do lots and lots of drafts, but probably I have between 3 and 5 moments or drafts where I go, where am I? So I would say there's the first draft, there's the third draft, there's the 5th draft, and then there's the 7th draft, and that's when I kind of go, is this still my film? Where have I gone? Is this, you know, and along the way I'll have done various tweaks and changes and rewrites and pulled out and changed the perspective, gone back, you know, read, eventually then actors read it, you know, and it goes on and it builds. But there is a very simple process, and actually there is a sort of reoccurring process, and for me it's, I spend a long time thinking about something, and then I digest material, and then I write quite a tight treatment now, which is almost like you're watching a film, and then I throw down my first draft, and then I give it out. My favourite film script has never got made, and it's still a complete mystery to me because I think it's my best piece, and I still think, why does that never got made? It's just one of those film scripts that haven't. So there are scripts where I am bemused and heartbroken. But most of the time I like brutality. I like someone saying, it just doesn't work. Because it's really hard. And if they're, you know, the worst is silence. The worst response you can get to, and that, I would say that's when it breaks my heart, is when you'll deliver something and what you'll get is, yeah, no, it's good. We're just waiting to gather our notes, and that's dead. you might, that film's over. That's never going to get made.
Shame came out of a meeting with the director and artist Steve McQueen. It's interesting to work with an artist. I don't consider myself one. An artist for me is someone who holds on to the single vision. Perhaps that is why film is a director's medium. The director is the one who has to juggle all the balls from conception to set and then edit and beyond. The ringmaster, and I suppose I believe the artist. That does not mean I don't believe that as a writer I can't be part of creating a piece of art. I see works of art all the time in film. What should have been a blind date lasting no longer than an hour, set up by our mutual agents, lasted 3.
We both have children, we both have partners, there were sort of similar rhythms to our life, I guess, and I guess we talked about our 20s and what that had been like and what's it like now going out into the world and internet dating, and does that drive to meet, to fall in love, does that change when you're married and you're settled, and no, I don't think it does. But also, what happens when that never settles? When you're constantly striving to, and I'd witnessed something recently. I'd witnessed somebody who I was quite close to really coming to the end of their life, and the thing that really shocked me when I watched them was that they only had a few hours to live, and it was still important to them that they got the attention of the nurse. And I'm talking about the sexual attention, the flirt. And I thought, good on you, you're in the last few hours of your life and you still want to get the attention of the nurse. And that was really the starting point when I talked to Steve. I said, I'd like to write about a man who's still looking for that kind of attention right to his dying day. And so we talked around that, and that's really how Brandon was born.
Focusing on the life of a man bound by his own compulsive sexual behaviour, the research took me into a world I thought I knew something about. Sex. We all do it, or hopefully do it at some point in our lives. Over the weeks, months we worked on this film, together Steve and I met people who had worked with sex addicts who were themselves recovering or battling with addictive sexual behaviour. This was a world where I found more than a dog whistle. There was a constant, surprising underscore of tiny behaviours and almost invisible transactions that flooded my senses and made me realise that this was a world that affected us all.
I think the collaboration with Steve McQueen is a really interesting one. I mean, this is the second time that he's collaborated with a very successful playwright. And before I spoke with Abi about Shame, had really believed this was Steve's film. But talking to her, you realise absolutely that is not the case. It was a complete, a collaboration in two halves.
We met, I live in London, Steve lives in Amsterdam, so we would meet in New York, and I went to... It's really easy. No, actually, really simply, we couldn't get anyone to talk to us in the UK because, sex addiction isn't really recognised, and obviously, there are lots of theories about it, but America loves to talk, so you could really get people to talk out there. So in America, we were both able to just plug into a whole group out there and talk to people. So we would talk, and the first time we went, we just met we met a lot of predominantly guys, and we found the addiction thing was slightly different with women. It was oddly, it was much more about romance and love and fantasy. It was a very different thing, but with the men, it was much sort of purer, and terrible generalisation, because I'm sure that's not true, but of everybody, but it was of this experience. And we would always kind of arrive and we'd eat. The restaurant scene's really interesting because we would constantly be talking. There'd constantly be someone going, "Yeah, no, that's great. No, yeah, Rioja's fine." So that food thing was we'd eat and we'd talk and we'd meet people and then we'd write. And the first Shame was Steve's idea and Steve's title, because we would often meet people and then we'd go, "We've got to get our plane," and we'd get on a taxi, and the journey to JFK I think is about 35-40 minutes with traffic. And often we would just not be able to talk. It was very odd. And there'd be this sort of weight. And Steve would just said to me one day, "It's shame."
The kind of real catalyst for the film was not the sex addiction or, kind of any of the male aspects of the story that came out in the end. But actually it was New York. It was being in New York and the kind of, looking at, I guess, for both of them, being in a kind of an outsider in a big kind of, very, very, very urban space.
Most of that film was written in the Standard, and of course the Standard becomes a very big, location for the actual film. The song with Kerry Mulligan singing is there, and the boom bar upstairs, and
the big sort of sex seduction scene is probably virtually in the room that I wrote in. So yeah, it felt very organic, the whole experience. The final film is in fact the last 40 pages of a 100-page script. We threw away the first 60 pretty early on, which was, for someone who rewrites and rewrites, both frustrating and liberating. It then became a process of distilling and distilling. Perhaps this was also because I worked with a visual artist who trusted in the image and that less is more, and even if it's no longer spoken, it will be heard. It demanded that I trust in the power of film.
I think what she did with Shame was extraordinary. I think that, you said that it was a kind of very male story. I actually don't think that's true. I think that when I think of Shame, I don't think of Michael Fassbender's character. I think of Carey Mulligan's. That's the heart of the film for me. And how she carried herself, how she sings, how she looks, how she dies. I think that's what you really are drawn to.
You're very
curious. Always. For the life of me, I don't know why anyone wants marriage.
Why people would want to get married, especially nowadays. I mean, it's, I don't see the point.
In relationships.
It doesn't seem realistic.
You still believe in it?
in relationships. Yes, it has to matter. We have to matter to one another. Otherwise, why are we here? Why are you here?
The food's supposed to be great.
No, I'm not saying it like that. I mean, I just mean, one person for the rest of your life. I mean, you come to restaurants, you see couples sitting together, and they don't even speak to one another. They don't have anything to say. They don't have anything.
They probably don't have to speak because they're connected.
Or they're just bored with one another.
You come to a restaurant, you order the same thing every night because you love it? Because you can't get enough of it? Or you tell everyone you know the service is just the way you want it, and you can't get the taste out of your head. So you go the next night and the next night, and that's it? That's the only place you can eat for the rest of your life?
What's your longest relationship? Exactly.
You can pour. 4 months.
You have to commit. You have to actually give it a shot.
I did. For 4 months.
For 4 months.
When I was preparing for this, I found some notes I wrote for Shame very early on, before I even started on the script. They made me smile because I hope that the chink of light that motivated me to write Shame, the essence of why I write, remains. Shame. Shame should be like a bag of sand. We should conceal it for as long as we can. Married single, works on Wall Street, we see a normal day and the man's life slowly unpeeling. All seems normal, but slowly and surely we sense that something is wrong. He visits the bathroom, a normal act, but with repetition we start to feel unsettled, suspicious. He works late most nights, the glow of the screen in his face. He takes the same route home from work, looks out for the same landmarks, the same tiny moments. As these build through the first 20 minutes, we see that this is the start of some ritual, the behaviour of an addict, his addiction to sex. Fade in, fade out to capture the sense of time moving on. This can be within the course of the day to extend our understanding, slowly reveal the tiny details of this man's flight paths from work to home, from day to night, and to show a sense of time passing over a longer period. Seducing the audience. Take it slowly, but he is a man alone, in a toilet, cubicle, doing what men do, alone, until someone unlocks the door. I hope the film carries all of this. Like a dog whistle, inaudible, but calling one to attention, provoking one to hear something beyond words, beyond language. Open, but in a state of knowing nothing.
I write to keep myself sane. I write. If I don't write, I get ill. But I write because I found the thing that probably gives me the most pleasure. And how lucky was I that I found that in my late teens, because most people spend their whole life trying to work out what that is. So, and I write to make sense of the world, and probably to communicate. I write because I really want other people to know. Well, I suppose actually one of the biggest things is I want to write and tell other people that they're not alone, because I spend my whole time observing things and thinking, God, I know that, I can understand that. Or even observing things in people that I haven't felt but thought, that's true, gosh, that must be hard. So I often write because I care about on a kind of democratic level, I care that we are all somehow united. And that sounds a bit worthy, but I suppose it is also one of the motivations for why I write.